According to experts, when building the dam, the planners ignored the ability to regulate the natural floods of rivers and lakes. The Chinese government recently admitted that it is impossible to rely solely on the Three Gorges Dam to regulate floods for the entire Yangtze River Delta. According to experts, the flood peak at the end of July and early August will be a real test for the flood management capacity of the Tamheat Dam, and the biggest challenge still lies ahead. Authorities reported on January 27, when the flood peak was at its peak, when heavy rain continued to pour down the upper Yangtze. Around the world, more and more people are opposed to the construction of large dams. People increasingly try to protect their rivers and dependent livelihoods from the impact of large dams. After many record floods in 2020, China continues to welcome floods. China has experienced more than 20 major floods since the beginning of 2020, more than double the same period last year, setting a historic record since 1998. Record floods are continuously occurring. The Chinese people are miserable. In a statement dated January 27, the Ministry of Water Resources said as many as 500 rivers in the country had exceeded the warning level, of which 300 rivers are above safe level and 77 are at record high levels. At the beginning of 2021, the average rainfall across China was 626 millimeters, 11% more than the same period last year and the second highest since 1961. According to the Hongkong Times, medium to heavy rain is forecast to continue to land in southern and western regions of China over the next 3 days, especially in some cities in Guizhou and Yunnan provinces, and Tuesday Shuyan in the southwest and Guangxi Zhuang Ethnic Autonomous Region. The water levels of some major rivers in northeastern China are still too high or on alarm. China's Ministry of Water Resources and the authorities pledge to continue the flood control work well. The emergency response to floods in China remains at the highest level. 2 of the Irrigation Ministry's working groups are currently in Heilongjiang Province, northeastern country to support flood prevention. Overwhelms. The water level at the Tam Gorges Dam remains extremely dangerous. Since the beginning of January, floods have left more than 400 people dead and 225 people missing. 20,000 homes were swept away and many cities remained isolated, according to the authorities on January 27. Economic loss is $18 billion. According to the Chinese leader, Mr. Biden has supported the Chinese flood with $1 billion. Mr. Biden is easing U.S.-China tensions compared to the time Trump was in power. Xi Jinping seems pleased with the new U.S. move, although U.S.-China tensions are still very tense in the South China Sea. Let's look back at the historic flood peak to draw comments on how to fight against the flood of China. The top of the Yangtze River in China. On August 18, 1931, the Yangtze River in China peaked during a horrific flood that killed 3.7 million people directly and indirectly over the next several months. This is probably the worst natural disaster of the 20th century. The Yangtze River flows through southern China, one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. People in the region, most of which live on a subsistence level, depend on the river for water for their personal and farming needs. In April, the river basin area receives above-average rainfall. When the torrential rains came again in July, the stage was prepared for disaster. The Yangtze swept over an area of 500 square miles. The rising water caused 500,000 people to leave their homes in early August. As the water continued to rise in the first half of August and more rain, the rice fields that dominated the landscape were swamped, destroying crops. Big cities like Wuhan and Nanjing depend on this rice, and without it, people in the cities starve to death. In addition, typhoid and dysentery are plagued by the polluted river. Millions of people who died from the flood died of starvation and disease, many after the flood waters receded. Much of the disaster would have been averted if flood control measures were followed closely. The Yangtze carries large amounts of silt that accumulates in certain areas of the river and must be cleaned up regularly. However, with most of the region's resources devoted to civil war at the time, the river was neglected.